Thanks for coming. My name is Ben Piscopo, and I'm a learning designer at edX. I started, I have to confess, 6 months ago. So I am pretty new, and I do appreciate your patience and understanding with me. So be gentle with me. I heard you're going to be a great crowd, so I'm not worried. So today our discussion is about what's new in Studio, and more specifically in this particular session, assessments and how we use content libraries to get us where we need to be with higher stakes courses. So you no doubt have heard about these two things, right? Raise your hand if you haven't heard. All right. So a focus at edX and over the past year has been higher stakes courses that provide a higher touch experience, but still in a MOOC, because we need to scale these courses in a way that hasn't been done before. So our focus is to be able to provide more academic rigor, more integrity in our courses, as well as security in our assessments. So first thing I want to ask is, how many people in this room have created a course in Studio before? Awesome. That's most people. How many of you have created a course and created an assessment, a knowledge check, a quiz, an exam? All right, still quite a few of you. Right. So you know the importance of assessments when it comes to determining whether or not learners have reached your outcomes, what you're expecting them to get out of your course. It's extremely important, and they're pivotal when it comes to supporting the learning design that you've chosen for your particular course. We're going to talk a little about some assessment types, including content libraries, some things not to forget when you're using content libraries. Actually, how many people have heard of or used content libraries before? Okay, a good handful of people, a couple handfuls of people, great. We'll also talk a little bit about updates to open response assessments and how they support courses like you might expect in MicroMasters and professional certificates, as well as some updated other types of assessments and updates to them that, again, support better courses. So we start with content libraries, and specifically, when you hear content library, it's actually a pretty generic term. It sounds like we're just going to house a bunch of content in there. But really, they're predominantly, almost exclusively used for assessments. We create a pool of assessment test questions that are specific to a topic, and ideally at a particular level of proficiency. And it helps us to randomize questions that are then displayed to learners in a particular quiz or exam. I want to start with just a quick use case here. So Anand Agarwal, our edX CEO, has basically rerun his circuits and electronics course for 6 years and has had very little overhead when it comes to creating new questions for his exams, because you're able to create so many up front and then randomly shift them through in front of the learner's eyes. So this really helps. It's probably requires a bit more time at the beginning when you're setting this up, but can save you a lot more time down the road. Another example, also from MIT, is the randomizing of assessments, but also for cohorts. So within edX courses, you can experience a course for free, but you can also pay and be a verified learner. And in both situations, this course is providing randomized assessments. All right? So not only to protect the integrity of the paid track, but also for the free audit track. So we're creating content library in Studio, but that's not really the end of it. Right? Within your course, within the course outline in Studio, you'll need to create a component called a randomized content block. Doesn't really roll off the tongue that nicely, but it is something that you've got to remember if you're going to use these. I do want to show you just an example of what that looks like in a course that I created. It's just a sandbox course, so don't get too excited. So this is the learner side, as you can see, although I'm viewing it as a staff member. And in this particular, a day in the life of this particular, sort of a famous American suffragette from the 1800s, Louisa May Alcott. In this particular quiz, I've actually numbered the names or the titles of each of the problems that are pulled in. It's not a recommended practice, but it's just for demonstration purposes. And you can see that out of my 6 questions that I put in there, 4 is displayed, 5 is displayed, and then 1, and so on, right? So these questions get randomized, and that is done through. So within this particular section, we have a subsection called A Day in the Life of, and this is my randomized content block quiz. Again, it rolls off the tongue so nicely. So RCBs look like this, and what you'll do is you'll just hop into it and you'll edit the block, and then make sure that if you make any changes to your content library assessments, that you manually update them in here. Some of these things, some of the steps that I'm telling you, and then also in the notes that I've provided that you'll see on the schedule website, you'll find to be a bit manual, but we're always improving and updating the experience for course authors. All right. I'll let you also refer to the documentation on this too. I think that's all I wanted to share for this. You'd set sort of the count or number of questions that you want to provide, and then it would randomize them for you. Great. Last thing on content libraries that I want to share with you are some considerations. I mentioned that your content library should be based on a particular topic, and that's because at the moment, content libraries don't have like a tagging feature that would allow you to say, this question belongs in this quiz, this question belongs in that quiz. So you'll need to create multiple content libraries. Same goes for beginner versus an intermediate or advanced content. You don't want advanced questions slipping into a beginner level quiz or something. You can use content libraries across different courses. You just need to point your RCB component to it. You'll probably get started like most do, with one administrator, and then if you do have more folks on your team that do need to make edits or update your content, then make sure that you provide that access. So there's a separate access step for your course team. Make sure that you award points, the same amount of points for each question, as it might be obvious to you, but if you're randomizing these questions and one is worth 5 points and the other is worth 10, different learners might get different amounts of points. So these are some really important reminders if you're going to implement content libraries. There are additional reminders in the handout notes that I've provided. All right, so that covers content library. I think the naming isn't very straightforward, but the value, I hope, is very clear. And will assist you in creating better, higher stakes courses in the near future. Another way to maintain the security of the assessments that are in your quizzes is to just time your test, right? So if you as a course author go in and time your exam or your quiz or however you plan to use it, the learner will have the option to choose to start their test or to start their exam. Once they do, the clock starts ticking. Once that hour, 2 hours, in fact, we have examples that provide 24 or 48 hours for their own purposes, depending on the type of questions or project in some cases. Once that timer has gone down to 0, the learner will not be able to see the questions that have been provided there until the due date. So by default, after the due date, your content that was time-bound can now be viewed. In order to tighten up that exam even more, you need to make sure that you do select that you want to hide that, hide the questions and the content even after the due date. So I know specifically, and I have so many MIT examples, and I'm sorry, but in pretty much all of their MicroMasters, I could probably safely say, their exams definitely hide questions after the due date, and the only location that a learner can get their final exam score would be, does anyone know? On the progress page, yeah. So they would have to visit the progress page because in some ways you might think that there's some redundancy in displaying quiz on your outline and that you have a quiz that's listed on your project progress page. But in any case, your quiz becomes a special exam once it's timed. Same goes for virtual proctoring. I'm not going to get into virtual proctoring today. There's a lot of moving parts there, but essentially those exams are timed as well, and they're set up a little differently. Another thing that's important for a lot of course teams is the ability to gate content. I want to make sure that it's clear. We're gating content at the subsection level, if you're familiar, right, with the course outline. And in this way, if you have a course that is built with sort of mastery design at its heart, and you do not want learners to move ahead until they've scored an 80% on a certain quiz, let's say Module 1, they complete it with an 80%, they now unlock the rest of the content. This is especially useful if you have a self-paced course, right? If you have a self-paced course and everything's visible from the start, then you might consider using the prerequisite settings. But keep in mind, this is also a bit manual at the moment. You would have to actually set the prerequisite for all of the subsections of that following module, right? And so on through the rest of the course. The system does allow you to accidentally create this sort of prerequisite loop where the learner just cannot go anywhere. That is a super important highlight that we note in training. So you need to be careful that you, 1, set the quiz as the prerequisite, 2, make this based off of the results of that quiz. Right? Sorry if I'm unveiling some of the hidden manual idiosyncrasies of the platform, but like I mentioned, these items have been noted and quite possibly will get an update in the future. All right, open response assessments. Since a lot of you have created courses and assessments in edX, you might be aware of open response assessments, which really allow us as course authors to ask a question or prompt the learner to enter some response in an open field, right? They also have the ability to upload their answer as a document, or even in some really interesting cases, we have some art courses on edX.org. Newcastle X's Natural History Illustration course is a really cool example where learners are actually drawing birds and leaves and different patterns and uploading taking a picture with their phone and uploading that to the course, right? So they're uploading their work to this particular assessment component. So I do want to start with this use case from University of Queensland, which has a really comprehensive IELTS course. This is the International English Language Test that is taken in many parts of the world for admittance to university. And in this particular course, there is a section on writing and getting feedback on their writing. They actually set it up a lot like the IELTS test itself. I've taken a look. I'm also an IELTS examiner, so I've actually graded this writing test before in another life. So what the learner can do in there, and I believe I've pulled it up as an example. Different teams actually go about designing their courses in different ways. There are a lot of units on this page, for better or worse. Try not to judge, because again, different teams have their own ways of building out their content. But in this particular case, learners can rely on their peers to respond to really how well their writing response was. So in this example, some criteria is described in advance. This is the example from a sample IELTS writing preparation book. And this is where you'd provide your response. What I want to focus on here, especially for people who haven't used auras before, is that there are a number of steps in a typical aura. You can choose to use all the steps, or just one of them, or just 1.5 of them. In this case, University of Queensland decided to allow learners to sort of train themselves on the rubric. So part of an aura is not only submitting your work, but also checking to determine how well your submission ranks based on a particular rubric. So there is a section in auras. I'll defer you to the documentation or course author training. We also have Studio X for training as well, if you'd like to take a look at that, in which learners are going to read the rubric, follow the different criteria, and then assess their peers. It's recommended that you require learners to assess probably 3 other peers, require them to receive about 3 reviews as well on their work, because sometimes a peer assessment can be a little wishy-washy. We have to factor that into the potential score that comes out of a peer assessment. It's not a perfect science, but if you do allow for more or require more reviews, the better the outcome. There's even the option of having a learner review 5 peers and receive 5 reviews. Depending on the size of the assessment, how long it would take, it might work for you. And it's always better to require more reviews. A learner should review more people than they have to receive, right? And that's essentially to make sure that they get at least 3 reviews. You can also do you can also assess your own response, and then receive your score at the end. So, to recap, your auras can be set up as a training aura just by itself. Here's the rubric. This is what, these are the criteria that you would need to judge yourself or others based on. Self-assessment, peer assessment, as well as staff grading, okay? But now you're thinking a MOOC is a scaled learning experience. How could we use staff grading in this situation? Yes?
The classic example would be that you submit work in an unpopular MOOC, so not too many learners.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So the classic example would be you submit your work and you've been waiting for days and days, not a review, so you're just desperate and you're frustrated, and you end up flowing into the discussion board and just complaining. So that's when staff grading.
Oh, then the course team would come in and do an override. That's a thoughtful response. I'd say it is possible for a staff member to go in and adjust grades if necessary. You can reset an aura, or you can reduce the required number of reviews. So there are a number of things that staff can do anyway, regardless. But this was built primarily for, in our MicroMasters and professional certificate programs, to be able to grade verified learners specifically. So if you do have learners who are on a paid track, or if it's a smaller group of learners, then staff grading can be super helpful. One, there's the concern that if you just have peer grading, like what's the quality of the outcome? It's mixed, but it's still pretty reliable. If you have an expert or a TA who's specializing in this field, then you have the opportunity to do some staff grading with their assistance. And make sure that at an administrative level, you plan your course team size and other resources for this purpose, if you use it. There's an example of a hospitality management course, I believe. It's Hong Kong Poly University. In that particular course, they have thousands of audit learners who are following the peer assessment aura, but their verified learners are doing graded. And I think the last time I checked, and they started in early spring, they had about 60 verified learners. So their small team downloaded those responses, marked them manually, and submitted them with the score, right? Yes?
How can you mix them? I mean, everybody will see that there is a staff grading, or can you say only this cohort gets staff grading?
Yes, based on cohort. So we can actually create two components, one that is for verified, one is for audit. That way everyone gets to see something. That's extremely important. We're going to talk a little more about cohorts in the next session, but that would be one way to display the same assessment but for two different groups.
And does the feedback needs to be anonymized, or can it be non-anonymous?
It can be anonymized.
Can it be not anonymized?
Well, it would be manual. So I mean, do you mean the staff person?
No, the peers. Can I know who graded me?
No, the peer grading is anonymized. So you won't know who is the one that gave you your score. Mm-hmm. A couple other items to note. We're talking about updates to auras here. So as a course team member, if you do want to check in on a particular aura and see where learners are in your multi-step aura, you can actually take a look here and see where people are. You can also go to the instructor dashboard, take a look at a glance at all the auras that exist in the course, and see the total number of responses, where they are, and so on. Really helps for something like, for an assessment tool like this. Quickly, some considerations if you're going to use auras. You might actually create an entire unit that introduces the rubric that you create within an open response. This is not only an opportunity for learners to learn, to evaluate their responses, or to find out what is correct or what is incorrect, but there's like a metacognitive aspect to this where they're identifying what their responses are in terms of perhaps comparing it to the best possible response. The training step, if you do use the aura training, you can seed a couple examples in there, perhaps a not so good one and a better one, and actually let them choose in the rubric, evaluate it through the rubric and see if they're close to what the professor or instructor expected. Right, so the learning step in auras can be really useful. Be careful, make sure that you set deadlines that are well enough in advance. If you're releasing modules weekly, then make sure that if you're using an aura at the end of a week, you give learners a good 2 weeks for peer assessments, right? Because learners need to come in at their own time and give responses. Peer reviews are better at the beginning positioned at the beginning of a course. And that is primarily because sometimes participation will drop off near the end of a course. If you do position an aura at the end of a course, especially on a self-paced course, it's quite possible that you'll have a number of committed learners that do not get enough peer reviews. Right? Again, I'm speaking specifically for peer reviews or peer assessments. One note, so that's self-study or self-paced course, but on the instructor-paced course, we find that, and the data shows us that with deadlines that are weekly or the end date of a course is pending or is actually coming up quite quickly, learners actually take action more often than if it was a self-paced course for going many months. Last couple items to note. There's been some updates in terms of the user experience and accessibility using hints and feedback. So your feedback can actually be quite robust in that if you have a multi-checkbox response, you can give different feedback to a learner that picks A and C versus a learner that picks A and D, right? If that's a situation that would be valuable for you in a formative type of assessment, then go for it. You also have the ability to create hints, up to 3 hints. If you find that a learner is wildly not connecting with the assessment and needs to be brought back on track, hints can be really helpful in that way. The new Draganddrop, which was mentioned, I think, even in Anant's keynote. Yeah. It's pretty impressive. Okay. Has been updated. It is also accessible and is can be used or completed on a mobile device. You'll find that more and more of these updates are more mobile friendly. And that brings us to some Q&As. I'd be happy to take your questions and see if I can provide answers to them. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
For the streaming,
Sure.
it is necessary to put the questions on the micro. So
Oh yes. Important announcement.
wait
Okay.
until I go with the micro.
Sure.
Thank you.
I won't make you run and.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
For these complex objects like the aura and others, I think that you are doing a great job, and it's really important that edX is providing those kind of objects for the community.
Thank you.
But for other objects, like you are saying, the Draganddrop, and there are many, many other things that you could put on a course. I've seen something that is H5P, that is a web store of components, and it's great, and it works also on phone and so on. Have you considered to make some kind of,
Like a component?
middleware, some component that integrates with H5P? So that
H5P?
because it's great.
Okay. Thank you.
And it supports also XAPI for analytics.
Yeah.
And that kind of work is already done and is diverting you from the great job that you must do. Okay?
I see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this kind of consideration I think is important, and we do offer partners and course teams the ability to use additional tools like this that if they want to make edits within the course or submit some inline code, there are some risks involved in that. So as edX, as the organization that we are, we don't have the resources to recommend formally that you use these kinds of third-party snippets or tools and so on. But certainly you could, and especially within the OpenX community, you have no trouble doing that. And yes, go ahead.
You were talking about the instructor dashboard that you can see. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
We found that to be completely inaccurate.
Yeah, I know
yeah,
you're
okay.
referring to.
So
But this, I also experienced that. I think it was a bug that got updated fairly recently. So it's worth taking another look at it. It's also a known. It is certainly being looked at. Yeah, it certainly is. And I'm also testing on edX.org and our Edge site, which might be different from what you're experiencing in an open edX distribution, for instance. Okay, all right. Well, we could follow up on that as well. All right, thank you. Did you have a question?
Hi, thank you very much
Hi.
for your presentation. My name is Stefania from Abstract. Regarding randomized content, content library, we have a customer that is using a lot content library in a great way. My question is there an idea or some improvement that you can do or are you planning maybe to know, to select some, for example, when I use a content library, I would like to have issue like, for example, selecting the author or selecting some keywords or selecting, for example, this is a randomized content for easy question or difficult question. Is there something improving in this direction to have more, or also to have and/or searching in this content? Is
Within the content library itself?
Exactly. Something that is on your map?
And thank you for your question. Content libraries are extremely important for the future of courses that that are on edX.org. At the moment, we're using it to create more security and integrity within our exams, but it's still a bit of a manual process. In terms of updates, future updates, I just go to product and ask them what is on the roadmap. I know that there are some product folks that have done some presentations in these 2 days, and you can take a look at those, but they're constantly getting feedback on how to make the content library authoring experience even better. And I know that this year that's important, but I'm sure throughout the year you'll start seeing some more updates to content libraries and quite possibly randomized content blocks too. But I don't have any update information on that, unfortunately. Yes?
Yes, you mentioned the prerequisites, and
Yes.
I have one question that's kind of threefold.
Okay.
And specifically, I've had issues using prerequisites, and I've had 3 of them. Number one, the formulas don't exactly work. You have to play around to find the exact percentage, and it's not even, I put in 90% or 90 points, and that's the threshold. Like, you have to just game it a little bit and repeatedly test. Second of all, they don't always work, opening it up. And I guess basically that's it. I have problems with prereqs all the time, to the point that when I was piloting it, I had to go back through when students were in and turn off every single prereq and open the whole course up. Oh, the third one is also you have to either refresh your tab or move out and move back in order for the next item to appear, or the next subunit, or however you set up the prereqs.
I see. No, those are important points in troubleshooting bits in there too. As course authors, we have to take these things into consideration. And certainly there are a number of pieces, like within the course, if you, for example, if you have an issue, like if you have a due date setting or a visibility setting that might conflict with prerequisites, it's important to solve those through beta testing. And if you can catch them before your course goes live, that's extremely important. So yeah, all I can offer is that, you know, take care, like be cautioned that this kind of thing might not work perfectly. And if there is a bug of some kind, then certainly it can be submitted to the Open edX community.
I mean, just to be fair, it's not like there wasn't thorough testing. We didn't set any sort of due dates. There's a self-paced course.
Yeah.
And this repeatedly happens with the one functionality of prerequisites. And having something like a prerequisite is a bare bones minimal requirement for any sort of LMS or content thing, from a design, delivery, and pedagogy aspect.
Right.
And it is buggy.
Okay.
You guys look into that, have any plans on enhancing it, making it make more sense and more functional?
No, those are really good points. I'll definitely share those comments and thoughts with the product team. How are we on time? We are at about, maybe we could take one more question real quickly.
Thank you. It's about the prerequisite. I'm not sure I understood all the options in there. Is it only based on results of a quiz, or can it be also based on has the person viewed the video, or has the work been submitted, or that kind of things?
At the moment, it is set up just so that if you pass a quiz at a certain threshold, then you have access to that next subsection or whatever was being hidden for prerequisite purposes. Yeah.
So do you think it could be possible that further development go in this direction, like you have to have spent so and so much time on an activity, or submitted your work, or
This is a great feature request. I agree with you. I think that it would be valuable for a prerequisite to not just be based on a quiz. There are many other types of learning experiences that I think are probably necessary to have before you enter another section or part of a course. But at the moment, prerequisites are pretty limited in this way. All right, so thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I hope this gave you a little more insight into what is possible with the platform regarding higher stakes courses. With a little manual work, as we've heard, you are able to provide a better course experience for learners that provides the integrity that us as course team members and our instructors and faculty are looking for. So thank you very much.